Welcome to the latest edition of Don't Take This as Gospel. I'm Mike Partika, and today's topic is brain dead dualism. Now, dualism is a word that is preloaded with a lot of meaning, so let me kind of narrow down what exactly it is I'm talking about by dualism in this case. In this case, I'm talking about the idea that something cannot exist without its opposite. Like you may have heard that joy cannot exist without suffering. You need that contrast in order for both to exist. Another one would be good cannot exist without evil. You have to have the contrast there in order to highlight the existence of either. None of that's true. Absolutely none of that's true. I was a little bit disappointed to hear this coming out of the mouth of Dr. Ian McGilchrist, who was quoting, paraphrasing really, William Blake. And I had to go back and look at William Blake's biography on Wikipedia and just say, is this guy a Christian? Because he doesn't sound Christian, and sure enough, he's not a Christian. He's basically a guy back in the 16th, 17th century, whenever the heck it was, who basically imbibed a lot of religious ideas, but at the same time tried to synthesize his own meaning out of it and just came out with crap, in this particular case at least. So why is this idea so obviously false? I mean, well, let's just look at it from the biological realm for a second and say, can there be life without death? Now, some people might say, no, every living thing has to die. But think about this for a second. However far back you think life began, when the first living thing came into existence, that living thing had yet to die. So it could be that this particular living thing never went on to reproduce, but at least for so long as it was alive, there was life in the universe, but there was no death in the universe, because death is the cessation of life. So yeah, I mean, even in the physical realm, when you're talking about something as essential as life, well, that was something that for a long period of time did not exist, and then when it first came to exist, existed without the presence of death. And it was only until this first organism of some sort died that death came into existence. So yeah, you actually can have something without its opposite. Now, what about things like good and evil and joy and suffering? Well, good and evil is actually more easy to prove than joy and suffering. I mean, just imagine a world in which the only possible sin is murder, okay? Can you imagine a world without murder? Yeah. I mean, there's nothing that says that because there are a bunch of people living, that one of them has to kill the other. That one of them has to deliberately take the other's life with no just cause beforehand. Yeah, you can actually have a world that is good without evil. Now, you might look at the totality of the world as it is right now, and you can look at all the evils that exist in the world right now, and you could say, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to get rid of all this evil? Well, that's absolutely true. You're not going to get rid of evil in the world. Evil is inhabiting this world now, and it's going to until the end of history. But that doesn't mean that it had to. If everyone actually behaved properly, you would not have evil in the world. You would have everybody behaving morally. And in the eschatological views of various religions, that's what you get when you transcend into the heavenly realm. You get a world where nobody's doing anything wrong. So that is a world without evil. That is a place where only good exists. And when you look back at the Abrahamic scriptures and you look at the Bible and the book of Genesis, you basically see the world that God creates posited as this entirely good world. I mean, not entirely good in the sense that it was totally shaped, because then humanity would have had nothing to do, and God basically gives humanity the task of going out and subduing the world and bringing it into some sort of subjugation to mankind's creative impulses. But it's still a very good world. It's not a girl. Yeah, as a contrast to a very good world. Oh my God. It's not a world in which there is some sort of undue death and suffering that plagues mankind, specifically. So you have God creating this good world for mankind, and then man, because of his disobedience, screws it up. So it is through man's fault that the world falls into this disordered state in which evil exists, because man brought that evil into existence. But it didn't have to be that way, and that's something that the Bible makes very clear. Now, I can't speak to other religions on this particular subject. I haven't studied the Eastern religions enough in this particular respect, but I do think they are more on the dualistic side, where they think that good and evil are some sort of warring concepts that are opposite and opposed to each other, and you basically serve one or the other in some sort of balance, but harmony between the two is some sort of ultimate goal. On the Abrahamic side, I would say that the idea is no, you want the good to dominate, you want the good to be all-encompassing, and the good can be all-encompassing. But you have to do, it is your duty to bring that world into being insofar as you can. You have to be good insofar as it depends on you. And so there is no excuse saying that you need to live in some sort of balance of good and evil. No, you're supposed to be wholly good all the time. And that is what the afterlife is presented as for those who believe, a land in which everything is wholly good all the time. Now, speaking of the afterlife, you're looking at this perspective of joy versus suffering now. It's like, well, wait a minute, if the afterlife is all joy, if you're looking at eternal joy, then how is it that that joy can exist without the contrast of suffering? Now, setting aside the idea that, there's supposed to be this eternal damnation as well, and you can view the eternal damnation of the sinners as being the contrast to the joy that you're experiencing, but let's just say that we were talking about the modern world. I mean, let's say life on earth as opposed to life in heaven, and can you have joy without suffering? Well, why not? I mean, think about this. Think about, do you actually have to go hungry to enjoy a good meal? Or can you enjoy the flavors of the meal and have that joy without the sensation of deprivation of hunger? Do you ever have to experience theft to appreciate your property rights? Do you have to experience death threats before you appreciate your life? There are so many things, there are so many bad things that people can inflict upon you, and maybe they will make you more appreciative of what you do have, but that doesn't mean that you could not have had joy in what you had without those things. All you really need in order to appreciate what you have is a contrast of joys, because one of the things about living in this universe as it is, where we have to experience things in a sequence of time, is that we can't do everything at once. So you don't need to suffer. You just need to be able to experience joy in various sequences. For example, if I eat a good meal, I'm generally not playing a video game at the same time because I've got to concentrate on the video game. But if I'm playing a video game, I'm not reading a book at the same time. And if I'm reading a book, I might not be listening to music at the same time. Now, all of these things are different joys. You don't need to have suffering interspersed between them in any way, shape, or form for you to appreciate each of these joys in their sequence. You just need to have a time when you are not experiencing that particular joy. And so your life can be a sequence of moving from joy to joy to joy to joy. I remember when I was living under the pandemic conditions for a year, and basically, I'm homebound. I was not working at the time, and my life was basically, okay, what do I want to do now? What do I want to do now? Because I had enough in savings that I was able to survive on it. And it was like, okay, well, now I'm going to listen to a podcast. Now I'm going to watch this TV program. Now I'm going to take a nap. Now I'm going to eat this meal. And I'm moving in this continual progression where I'm not suffering. I'm just basically experiencing different various joys in sequence. And I didn't need to experience, my laptop breaking down or something like that, because then that would be, oh God, that would be suffering, I tell you. Oh man, can you imagine being cut off from the internet? I just heard that Razor Fist or something, he had internet down at his domicile, and this is a guy who makes part of his living online. It's like, oh God. Yeah, I can't imagine these days. This is my lifeblood. This is my air. But you don't have to go through suffering in order to appreciate all that. You don't have to be put through suffering to appreciate the joys that you have. And that is the kind of experience that they talk about in these afterlife situations, that people will be coming and going. They will be doing different things. They will be spending time with various people. They will be spending time with God. They will be spending time doing various things that bring them pleasure. And they're different pleasures. It's not the same thing all the time. So that the contrast that is needed in order to highlight these joys is not really a contrast between joy and suffering, but just a contrast between joys. And so when you hear these people, and it's oh God, it's repeated so often, these empty platitudes of, well, you can't have joy without suffering, you can't have good without evil. Just understand, these people are not thinking deeply enough about the subject, because you should obviously be able to realize that a good world is not only possible, but it's what we're supposed to be aiming for. A good world, a joyful world, one in which people are not suffering. That's what we want. That's what we all fight for. That's what, when we are out there in the working world and we are trying to make money and we are trying to provide for ourselves and provide for our families, what we're trying to do is provide that home environment in which your home is a place of joy, where your home is where you can come back to and not have to suffer, but that you can just go from joy to joy to joy. You can go with the joy of being with a family member. You can go with the joy of being, having your comfort, your TV, your music, your food, whatever it is. And these are the things that we fight to maintain, and this is what we want to expand out into the entirety of the world. Don't feel like you have to compromise with or excuse evil and suffering and say, well, to make an omelet, you've got to break some eggs. No, you can, well, in that case, food, you do have to do that. But in terms of life, in terms of appreciation, you do not need suffering to experience joy. You do not need evil to understand and experience good. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching. This has been Don't Take This as Gospel. Please do subscribe so that you can get notification of the next presentation, either in this series or in one of my other series. And check out my YouTube channel for the playlists. Also check out my other channels, Rumble, BitChute, and you will see all of my social media and book links down in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you later.